listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. Here is Femi Abebefe.
Welcome to another edition of the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. I'm your host, Femi Abebefe. As always, make sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Our producer, Elliot Bowman, with us on the ones and twos. And Michael, it's already hot as hell out here in Las Vegas. I think a lot of people know that. It's 100 degrees. It's 7 o'clock in the morning right now. But our guy Elliot was on the ones and twos last night at the USA-Canada game. I was there as well, with 2/3 of the GM Shuffle represented for the Stars and Stripes. Did you catch that game last night? Your boy Embiid was out there, got 5 fouls. he was doing his thing.
Well, did he play like 5 minutes or something? He didn't play that long, did he? I saw his box score. I didn't see it, but yeah,
foul trouble.
I mean, the fact that he was out there was foul trouble. Well, it's hard when you know. We had Marcus Hayes on the show yesterday, and he's like, Lombardi's been picking on Embiid for 11 years. I'm like, well, what has been the reward? Like, what has been the reward? I haven't seen it, but look. God bless America. I hope we win. I'm rooting for us completely. So, yeah, I love the fact that Summer League has become part of the Vegas tradition out there. It really has. I mean, you could feel it. And Team USA, they've got to go, and they beat a good Canadian team. Stupid Dylan Brooks keeps running his mouth. At some point, when's somebody going to tell that guy to shut up? Shut up.
He was booed mercifully last night. Every time he touched the ball, introductions, just boo. He's the villain.
I wouldn't want that guy on my team ever. I wouldn't want that guy on my team ever. No chance.
Yeah, we'll see what the Canadian team does. They're the second choice in the market to ultimately win the gold medal. We're a heavy favorite. I believe like minus 400 I saw last time I checked. In Canada, it was like 8 or 9 to 1. But that concludes our Olympic basketball talk. But it's just something that I thought I'd brought up because 2/3 of the GM Shuffle was out representing last night at T-Mobile Arena for the USA and Canada. But let's get to another thing that we've been hot on, and that's this New York Giants off-season Hard Knocks. And it's, boy, I tell you what, Michael, this is really good television. Like I think I enjoy this one more than the training camp and definitely more than the in-season one. I think the league and HBO is onto something with this off-season Hard Knock. I just hope that a lot of the teams continue to participate in this thing because it's kind of exposing a lot here. But I don't know if the Giants are coming out of this thing looking too hot.
One of the things that I keep getting asked by people, friends of mine in the league, out of the league, is how did they let some of this stuff get on tape? Like the Jets, we had Connor Hughes on the show yesterday, and he was saying the Jets were very, emphatic about what wasn't going to be out there, whereas the Giants, I mean, some of these conversations, I don't think, and again, I'm not saying this as a Giant hater. This is about what we're seeing. You have to evaluate what you're seeing in an honest manner, and you don't see a strength of leadership from Joe Shane. You see somebody asking, a lot of people for their opinions, but you don't see a strength. And this whole Barkley thing we had some light shed on us when Hughes comes on and says, well, Shane believes that any running back that gets to the age of 27 is going to go downhill from that point. Well, they signed Devlin Singletary, who's 27. But, then he said to me, they signed him for a much cheaper deal. Okay, does that make it right? Just because it's cheaper, does it make it right? If they're declining, does it make it right? If you're declining and you're making 8, you maybe should be 4. If you're declining, you're making 13, maybe you should make 8. I don't know, right? So I think to me it's a lot about nothing. But I really felt like the phone call between Shane and the agent, part of the job of a general manager is to figure out the hand of your opponent. And I think the Giants have failed miserably in this in all areas. They had no idea Philly was going to be involved. They're sitting there thinking that no one's going to be involved. Philly and Houston were intimately involved in trying to sign Barkley. We all knew that. They didn't. And they completely didn't understand the market, which meant they weren't calling Josh Jacobs' agent. They weren't calling anybody else to get a sense of the market. Like, the market was out there for running backs. It didn't take people by surprise. And that phone conversation that I heard was Shane. When I listened to it, I would have said that agent had to deal with somebody. That's part of your job, is to figure out what's not being said. That's what leadership is about. Is you're in a negotiation with an agent. This isn't we're buddies talking on the phone like you're talking to your boy Dan Morgan. This is about, I got to figure out what cards you have. You got to figure out what cards I have. And I think that that's really what shows through that there's no leadership. There's no intuition involved in this. Well, promise me you'll call me back. Look, that never works. That never works.
Yeah, they're not calling you back. it's not happening.
They're not calling you back. And then you offer a deal that. Why would you offer the deal that you should have offered 3 weeks ago? We're just franchising this. You know what drives me crazy, Femi? We want to do what's right for you. What's right for you? Your job is to protect the New York Football Giants. Do what's right for them. Don't worry about what's right for Barkley. The Barkley being a franchise player, that you can complain all he wants. You could still negotiate a long-term deal. Mm-hmm. So I just think, to me, it was not about it. My big focus here, my biggest thing is, part of being a general manager is to identify what is truly the issue. And we wrote about this on the Daily Coach today, and we called this active inertia, which is essentially where you're busy doing stuff, but you're not doing the right things. The right thing for Joe Schoen to do once the offseason started was to go to Daniel Jones and say, Daniel, you've got $11 million guaranteed for skill and injury on the 5th day of the league year. We've got to figure out a way for you to give us back that $11 million, and we got to figure out a way to where we can pay for Barkley by using some of what you're going to do. We'll give you the money back if you dress for 17 games. We're not trying to take money from you. We're trying to rearrange money. I see people on Twitter say, Lombardi, he wasn't going to do that. That's called negotiation. Well, you have no position in the negotiation. Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do, because you could just simply say, okay, if you don't want to do this, we are going to bring in somebody, and we're going to pay them, and we're going to have competition. Mm-hmm. Like, there's a lot of ways you can get your point across without having all the leverage in the deal. And what leverage does Daniel Jones have? What leverage should he have? If I went to Daniel Jones and said, look, I'll take that $11 million, I'll put it in a roster bonus next year, I'll guarantee it for skill, it'll be there next year, and if you play in X amount of games this season, it becomes skill and injury guaranteed, so you don't have to worry about it. It's not going anywhere, but it's tied to an incentive. We just moved it into next year, and we'll deal with it next year. Like, there's, like, to me, what a job of a leader is to do the right thing. The right thing isn't figuring out how to sign Barkley. The right thing is to get the contract on Daniel Jones in the right area to where you can function as a team. That's been their problem all along. We said it last year. Yep. They went ahead and paid Daniel Jones. We said it was the disease of me. It came out to be true. That's what you got to fix.
Yeah. And like you said, like we're not second guessing. This is first guessing. We both were on here many a podcast a season ago saying, why are they giving Daniel Jones this kind of money? And I thought what was really interesting, you mentioned to go back to the Saquon Barkley stuff with Joe Schoen, and this was from episode 1, but it really kind of stuck with me. But Joe Schoen was essentially being like, we don't want to go down the franchise tag road because that was just too much on me last year. Like, I didn't want to go through. It was almost like he was like, I'm too stressed out by going down this road, so like let's not even have that be an option, which I was a little taken aback by that, saying, whoa, that's not what you should be saying as a general manager. Like, if that's an avenue that you can use to kind of maybe keep this player, shouldn't you go down that road if you want to ultimately keep the player?
I think you should. The cap went up to $254. What doesn't get addressed by Giant fans is last year we paid Jones and we paid Barkley. The cap went up way higher than we ever thought it was going to go up, and yet this year we can't afford both of them. To me, the worst line of all that demonstrates that Joe's not paying attention to the National Football League at all is when he said we can't pay somebody $40 million to hand the ball off. What the fuck is Lamar Jackson doing? What's he doing? He's handing it off to Derrick Henry at $12 million, right?
Yeah.
What's he doing? Like, what team are you talking about? What are we talking about? Joe Burrow, he's not handing it off. Yeah, Joe Burrow's running the offense at the line of scrimmage. Okay, they still pay T. Higgins, right? Mm-hmm. They still pay T. Higgins. I mean, like, the fact is the Philadelphia Eagles are paying $55 million to Jalen Hurts. They're paying $12 million. Their competitors went and did exactly what you say you can't do. Like, are we paying attention? Like, this whole Carolina, Buffalo building of rosters, Dan Morgan. I mean, like,
Demo.
Seriously, this is all like, who trained all these guys? Yeah. Like, what is the art of team building coming from this? It's just what it is talent acquisition. That's all it is. Mm-hmm. Like, look, Brian Burns is a good player. I'm not disputing that, right? Is he a game changer? He had 8.5 sacks last year. I don't think he changed the game for Carolina, but he's a good player to go with Thibodeau and to go with Lawrence. But you put Wilkins inside at guard and doesn't cost you anything? I'd rather have Wilkins than an edge rusher. Because if you have Wilkins and Lawrence inside to push the pocket, which is what you have to affect the most, then the edge rushers become beneficiaries of the line.
Yeah, 100%. It makes Kayvon Thibodeau's job a whole lot easier there. Another thing that we got from episode 2 of the offseason Hard Knocks with the New York Giants was the conversation between Joe Schoen and New England Patriots, I guess now general manager. I don't even know what the title is for Elliott Wolf, but New England Patriots kind of personnel man, discussing pick 3, which the New England Patriots obviously held, eventually taking Drake May. But here was the conversation at the Combine between Schoen and Wolf.
What do you, if just do this for me, if you guys are going to do anything at 3, like move out at all, again, you don't got to tell me your plan or anything, but if you have any inkling, just call me.
We've had a couple of teams call, and it's kind of been this conversation.
Yeah.
No one's offered. Were you guys 6?
We're 6, yeah. And
That's a good spot.
may not be till draft day. I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows how it's, but if you just keep me in the back of your mind, just
sure.
So, I mean, it pretty much confirms that the Giants were trying to move up to 3 to go ahead and select a quarterback in this past spring's NFL draft.
I read today Boomer Esiason said they're still not happy with Jones. Of course they're not happy with Jones. Yeah. That's why you had to go try to redo the contract. You needed to do something to him. And what was his leverage? He only had a skill injury guaranteed for most of the money next season. Like, what's his leverage? Like, you sit down and get the agent in the room and say, look, here's, we want your guy to be the guy, but you're going to have to help us here. Guy's coming off ACL. If he dresses for 17 games, we got no problem paying him $35 million. We should. I have a problem with that, but they shouldn't. And then, we go from there.
Yeah, I mean, this kind of more so confirms what Rich Eisen was talking about earlier this offseason when he said that the Giants had buyer's remorse, and they came out and said, no, we don't, but your actions kind of speak a little bit louder than the words from the New York Giants. We'll wrap this up real quick, but then on the other side, the offseason highlight is here. Blue chips, red chips. We start with the defensive backs coming up next year on the GM Shuffle.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. Here is Femi Abebefe.
All right, we'll clean up the off-season Hard Knocks with the New York Giants before we get into blue chips, red chips, defensive backs, corners, and safeties here on the GM Shuffle. We also saw in episode number 2 a lot of the interviews that they do with the players at the NFL Scouting Combine in Indianapolis. Of course, they brought in the quarterbacks, and I thought it was Brian Daboll was kind of going back and forth with the terminology and the plays, which is interesting for football fans. But the conversation with Malik Neighbors I thought was really interesting, Michael. And just from an overall standpoint, what have you thought of, I guess, the portrayal of head coach Brian Daboll in this, and the conversation with Neighbors where he pretty much told them, he's like, hey, we want some dogs on this team, got to harness some of our emotions, which Joe Schoen then kind of smiled at Daboll after what we saw last year happening on the sidelines with, hey, it's the pot calling the kettle black there a little bit, but what do you make of how Brian Daboll has been portrayed so far in this Hard Knocks?
Having known Brian for a while, I think it's an accurate portrayal of his personality. I do. I think he's just being natural. I don't think he's doing something for the camera. And I would say that even as a friend of his, I would say that. I think, look, to me, those are hard interviews. They're just 15 minutes, so it's tough to get to the root of it all. A lot of people in that room. I mean, that looked like the Copacabana when Henry Hill was trying to get a table at the front of it. I mean, Jesus God, it was crowded. I'm not used to that many people in a room because I think when you have a lot of people, when you ask a lot of people their opinion, you're going to make a bad decision. But look, they want inclusion, which I think is somewhat important, but roles are even more. I think the kid did a good job. I think the kid presented himself. I don't think you're sitting there. I think Rome Odunze was really good. I could see why teams fell in love with him, the way he answered the questions. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. was good too, although there's more issues there that relate to, what's going on in terms of the whole, NFLPA stuff. And then I thought Caleb Williams was good too, but he still hasn't signed his contract, which is fascinating, right?
Yeah,
he's still under contract with the Bears, and there's really no debate over what the contract is. It must be some kind of language in terms of the offset bonuses, but there's something going on there for him not to have signed his contract.
Yeah, that's an interesting storyline because like we've seen a lot of these guys sign them, and it's not. This isn't 20 years ago when it was like there were actual negotiations. These things are sort of slotted in. It's like we know what you're going to make. I guess, like you mentioned, it's all the language.
Exactly.
We saw it with Joey Bosa when he was with the Chargers, and that was kind of like a big deal. He ended up, it was like week 2 or week 3 when he finally signed that contract, and like
it was all about offset language. Yeah. It was all about offset language and spread of the money, and so it's kind of a ridiculous point. If you take Caleb Williams first, you got 5 years. You're not cutting them after 3. You hope not, at least. That and I'm sure that's what. I don't even know if Caleb Williams is an agent. I mean, his dad was handling a lot of things, and they haven't really picked an agent, which tells me that the reason they probably haven't picked an agent is because they haven't found somebody who's telling them what they want to hear.
Yeah, maybe that's what the case is. We've seen it before.
Agents are probably telling the truth. Like, here's the deal. Here's what you're going to get.
Yeah.
Here's the way it's going to get spread. No. We want something different. Okay, we don't want you. Then to go find somebody else. But you can't find somebody who's going to sing that song.
Yeah, that's a tough one. But I'm sure eventually he'll sign and he'll be there. Because if he's not there, then we'll see it on Hard Knocks. The Chicago Bears, the training camp, Hard Knocks training camp coming in. What 10 days for the Bears? 10, 12 days? It's right around the corner.
Yeah, we got, 2 more? We have 2 more giant ones. I guess the next one, Stormy was saying on the show yesterday that the next one's going to be the one where, we find out about their plans. Obviously, they make the Brian Burns trade.
Yep.
And they improve, they sit there and they want to improve the offensive line. And so they sign Illuminor and play him at guard, which he's not a guard. And they sign
Runyon.
They sign Runyon. I mean, that's their, and they don't draft a guy in the first any of the draft. I know they gave away their second round pick, but to me, I would have signed Wilkins, kept my 2. Like, I would have rather done that.
Yeah. I mean,
and maybe they couldn't sign Wilkins. Maybe Wilkins, tax-free money in Las Vegas, all that stuff. But to me, I'm a believer in the tackles are the game today. We've gone back to the 60s, 70s era where the defensive tackles, to get in the paint, quarterbacks can step up on those outside edges. Mm-hmm. What they can't do is if somebody's in front of them. And when you have guys like Lawrence and Wilkins, you're sitting there saying, okay, man, this is hard. It's hard to step up.
Yeah, and those guys apparently are like really close friends, obviously played at Clemson together. Maybe they could have gotten him to take a friendship discount or something like that, but I guess they wanted to go down the Brian Burns path. Christian Wilkins now here, like you mentioned, in tax-free Nevada, hanging out with the Las Vegas Raiders. All right, let's get to blue chips, red chips. We're starting off with the defensive backs. We will do this series all throughout the rest of the offseason, and it'll lead us all the way to the quarterbacks right before the start of the regular season. If you're unfamiliar with it, Michael puts out who he believes are the red chip and blue chip players at each position or position group. Red chips, really good. The blue chips are the elite. Those are the creme de la creme at the NFL at that position. We'll start off with the cornerbacks here, Michael. For your red chips, you have L'Jarius Sneed, now of the Tennessee Titans, previously with Kansas City, Paulson Adebo with New Orleans, Deron Bland with the Cowboys, Jalen Johnson with the Chicago Bears, and then Rasul Douglas, a sneaky good pickup for the Buffalo Bills this past season.
Yeah, I mean, look, one of the things you really want to have is somebody who can play man-to-man, and I think that's critical, right? When the game is on the line, we're going to have to cover somebody. We're going to have to win with man-to-man defense, and I think Adebo from New Orleans, nobody realized. The guy had 18 passes broken up. He was able to make, and he missed 2 games last year. He had 4 interceptions. I thought he played really well. Jalen Johnson in Chicago's scheme, I think he's a really good player. They play a lot of zone in the Matt Eberflus scheme. But I do think, to me, you got to find guys that can lock on. And I think some of the guys that are missing, as we go through this and look at it, I think like Devin Weatherspoon, I thought he played really good last year. He just missed it. I debated between Rasul Douglas and Witherspoon. I think he's a really good rookie. But again, I think Witherspoon played more zone, more 2. I think he's going to be a really good player for Seattle this year. I like him. Douglas came in and gave them somebody who could play man-to-man and made plays on the football. The one I'm not sure of as a top 10 player is Bland. He's got the numbers to speak for it, but I do think he's going to be vulnerable. I think he's going to be on this list this year, and he could be easily off it next year.
Yeah, I mean, he's a gambler. I mean, everyone kind of talks about Trayvon Diggs as the ultimate gambler or whatever. I think Deron Bland is Trayvon Diggs times a million with what he does to some of the gambling. But, hey, he makes big plays. He got those interceptions, 5 pick sixes, which is an NFL record in a single season.
You can't ignore.
Yeah, you can't ignore that.
He made plays.
Yeah, he made a lot of plays. The blue chip guys. the elite. You have Sauce Gardner for the New York Jets. Derek Stingley, his draft classmate of the Houston Texans, jumps into this. Jalen Ramsey of the Miami Dolphins. Trent McDuffie, shout out to the Washington Huskies, with the Kansas City Chiefs. And then Charvarius Ward of the San Francisco 49ers.
You know, and I think, to me, when you look at the Chiefs, McDuffie's probably the best slot corner in football. He's going to play outside corner this year. It will be interesting to see how he does at that and how he holds up. Ramsey only played in 10 games. Didn't see a lot of action, but it's hard to keep Ramsey off this list. I have a hard time putting Ramsey in a red category based on his talent level, because he's really talented. So I think that's really important. And I think Stingley really has been a really good player. I think Stingley has changed how Houston can play. He's got great man-to-man skills. I mean, when they picked him, I wasn't sure, because they were playing cover 2, and you're wasting a great player on cover 2, but they've got a great player. And I think Gardner's the same thing. I think when you watch the Jets now, as you see the Jets go through their season, they play more man-to-man because Gardner can play it. They're not a cover 3 team like they were with Pete Carroll, like the Pete Carroll scheme. And DJ Reed on the other side is a good player too. Yep. And I think Ward for the 49ers is the same thing. His contract will be up. So, I mean, all those guys can go play man-to-man against any receiver, with the exception of like Tyreek Hill. Yeah. But the length of Gardner and Stingley and Ramsey make it really challenging.
Is he the best guy in the league now that he's entering year 3? I mean, he's been all-pro the first couple of years.
I think Stingley might be the best guy in the league. I really do. I think Stingley's really good. Yeah, I think Stingley's really good.
He's awesome.
I think Stingley's got I think he's starting to come into his own. I really do. I think the scheme can help. He's got good pressure. Gardner's a good player too. We're talking about blue chip. We're talking about the top 5 corners in the league.
Splitting hairs. Yeah.
We're missing some guys here too. Like Derek Ward from Cleveland's not on the list.
What about
Surtain?
Make it.
He was hurt last year.
Yeah, I want to ask you about Surtain. How come you left him off?
I probably missed that. That Surtain belongs on the list. He belongs on the list. I probably should have, he played all 17 games. He only had 12 passes. He doesn't get a lot of action. I think that's the bigger issue. But you're right. He belongs on the blue chip list. Probably should have replaced Bland with Surtain. There's no doubt about that. I was wrong on that. So that's one I missed there.
Yeah, so Patrick Surtain, a really good player, but I think these corners are the best that we have in the National Football League. Let's get over to safeties before we wrap this thing up. Red chip safeties, Xavier McKinney, who the Giants were trying to sign, but he went over to the Green Bay Packers eventually. Tyrann Mathieu, the ageless wonder with the New Orleans Saints. Minka Fitzpatrick with Pittsburgh. Geno Stone with Cincinnati. And then Eloy Gilman with the Los Angeles Chargers.
Yeah, look, I think Geno Stone, is going to make a huge difference for the Bengals. He played really well for Baltimore. He's got great ball awareness. Fitzpatrick was injured a lot last year, but he's still a good player, and McKinney's a good player. The one thing about Green Bay, those safeties had to make too many tackles because their run defense was not very good. So, Gilman is a guy that when you watch the Chargers, you don't really realize because, I didn't put Derwin James on this list because I didn't think he played as well. I thought Gilman played better than James.
Yeah, Derwin James' injuries has kind of been his problem over the last few years here. Can he stay healthy on the field? The blue chip guys, Jesse Bates in Atlanta, Antoine Winfield Jr. with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Jabril Peppers with the New England Patriots, Javon Holland with the Miami Dolphins, and Kyle Hamilton with the Baltimore Ravens.
I think Peppers finally has found his way. They put him down. They really utilized him. He's a good player. He's got one more year left on the contract. I think he's going to get paid. Winfield obviously got paid. Bates got played. Holland's eventually going to get paid, and so will Hamilton. I think these 5 guys are really good. Everybody talks about Derwin James, but to me, his impact hasn't been felt on the Chargers. I thought Gilman was the better player there. So, I didn't have him in the top 10. He's got top 10 talent. I just don't think it's played that way. I think he'll play way better this year for them. I really do. I think they'll make the scheme fit him more. Like Kyle Hamilton is scheme specific. He's really a good player, but I think they do a great job of utilizing him as a nickel, safety, corner, in the slot. They really do a good job of his role, and I think that's what they got to do with Derwin James.
Yeah, Kyle when he was selected in the first round, people were like, okay, we see the talent, we saw the flashes at Notre Dame, but can he actually do it? But Baltimore found a great role for him, and now he's one of the premier defensive players in the National Football League. 50-1 to win Defensive Player of the Year if you want to get in on that.
I think if he had to play on the third level the whole time, it wouldn't work. But I think the way he plays, it works, and the way they use him. And I don't think James has been done that way.
KYP, know your personnel, and the Baltimore Ravens certainly do that. as they went ahead and deployed him in a way that has been successful for him and also the team. All right, that does it for this edition of the GM Shuffle. Blue Chips, Red Chips will continue to roll on next week, but until then, have a good weekend. Subscribe, rate, and review as always. Elliot Bowman with us on the ones and twos. Michael, I'll talk to you next week on Monday.